Hi, I'm Dr. Mitch Harlan, and welcome to the Truth Talks podcast. Today, I'm joined by an amazing guest, but before I introduce them to you, I want to ask that you please like and subscribe below. That way, we can continue to bring you these incredible stories. And if you're already liked and subscribed to our channel, we thank you for all of your support. Hi, I'm Dr. Mitch Harlan, and welcome to the Truth Talks podcast. You know, every podcast we do is something about someone who's getting through a story, a perseverance story, a motivational. This one becomes a little bit more personal for me today. My guest today is Dr. Parris Watts. I'll just introduce you right now. Parris, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Mitch.
We're going to call you, I'm going to kind of introduce you as the professor. So you are highly cerebral in the academic world, but that's not why you're on this show today. The reason I wanted to bring you on, and you were one of my top guests that I've always wanted to bring on this show, and just because the impact that you've had on my life, and it was as a coaching role. And I still use a lot of Parris quotes, a lot of Parris isms, even in making business decisions and all the stuff I've done. And I guess we discussed it's been 38 years since we played together. But I want to introduce everybody to you. You are a professor. You are always in the cerebral ranks, which makes a whole lot of sense as we're going to be telling this story, because you coached from a professor-type attitude, I guess we would say. But I want to talk and start out where we met, which was basically the Ragtag 10.
Yes, very well. Actually, as you recall, we met on a Saturday morning, about 10 a.m. up in Glasgow, which was a community about halfway between where you lived in Salisbury and where we lived in New Franklin. And they were one of the four teams in our kind of regular season league. We met there to kind of form a team to go to it was the district Babe Ruth tournament for 13-year-olds that year. And as you recall, there were only 6 players that came. And we needed obviously at least 9 to play. And we had a practice. It wasn't a full practice because we didn't have a full team there. But we kind of just said to each other, do we need to consider not doing this? And the 6 of you there said, absolutely not. We want to do it. I said, well, you're going to have to rustle up some more players. You got a week to do it. And we'll meet here a week from today, which we did. We came back. And at that time, we had a total of 10 players, hence the Ragtag 10 tag that we had. We started with those 10 players. We basically had a full-blown practice that day. We had a couple more because, as you recall, we had to leave on Wednesday to start that tournament in Joplin on Thursday. So we didn't have a lot of practice time. And we were from 4 different communities and really had never even played close to anything together, played against each other. But as 13-year-olds, you remember, a lot of 13-year-olds didn't even play because it was a 13 to 15-year-old league. So we had a lot of work to do in just a couple of 3 days there. We pulled it together, went down to that tournament, and we'll talk more into what happened there if you wish, but that's how it all started. And it was a great start, but the days and the months and the years that followed and the outcomes were even greater.
You know, that's why I wanted to bring you on this episode. You know, I coach with my kids, and everything in my coaching that I do with the kids, I'm always trying to live up to Parris Watts. And I think, you know, you're in such a formidable years at that point in time, and it's the love of the game, but there was something special about what you did and how you coached us, and it has stuck with me for a life. Another guy that we know that played for you, Steve Johnson, went on to have a good career with St. Louis Cardinals and all that good stuff, and we still talk about Parris Watts as our coach, and we had tons of coaches afterwards. So I want this episode to really be revolve around what is it about your coaching style and who you were that impacted so many of us. That is, I think, the charm and the kind of the magic around how you approach coaching.
It's a great question, and I love to answer this because my whole goal in my teaching later as administrator in my university work, I always wanted to try to help the persons with whom I worked to become the best they could be, no matter what it was, whether it was playing junior Babe Ruth baseball or becoming a professional in my field of public and community health, or just in day-to-day life. And it has been a remarkable way to very simply incorporate into everything I do, calling people to excellence, helping them recognize that they are capable of doing things beyond what they even thought they could believe it could be possible to do. And then to help them actually accomplish those things and to truly become the best they could be.
And man, am I going to highlight that on this podcast. So here we are. I'll set it up. Ragtag 10. Every other team had 2 and 3 different sets of uniforms, come in with their trailers, the whole 9 yards. We had our own uniforms from our own town, and we looked like that Bad News Bears show, and we crushed them. You made us believe that we could beat any team that drove up, no matter what they were driving in, no matter how they looked. You convinced us of that.
The answer to that is you guys were just so special. Now, we didn't have great talent up and down the lineup. When you think that we just kind of pulled together 10 players scrapped around to even get them to even come and try it and be a part of a practice. And the first practice we had with all 10 there, I could tell there was something extraordinary about this group. And as we started to work together, the chemistry and everything clicked, and we took what we had and made the best of it. You were a great player. I'm just going to brag on you a little bit. You were an incredible hitter. You played center field like I've never seen a young person, 13, 14, 15, 16-year-olds in those 4 years I worked with you, play it in my life. And we had on that team other guys like you, and yet we had to kind of fill in some holes. And we had, for instance, our shortstop would have been a great right fielder, but we didn't have a shortstop. So we had to find somebody with a strong arm, and he had it, could play shortstop, and he did a fine job there. We had other players that were kind of out of position. Some of them hadn't even played the position we put them in, but I had the knack in my coaching years to be able to find the right spots to put players on the field for the best defensive outcomes. And I had a good ability to put a lineup together that would work, a hitting order that would work. And boy, ours was there. Now, we had some holes in that lineup in terms of hitters not as great as you and some of the others. We had some defensive flaws out there, but we did the best we could to pull it together. And we were kind of blessed in a special way, I think, that everything just fell into place. Now, the years that followed, the 3 additional years you played, it kind of changed. And we would have 7-8 hour practices. We would have these several practices a week because we kind of got a taste of it with that group of 13-year-olds. You guys led the way from that time on. Even when you were 14-year-olds with a 14, 15-year-old team, you guys were the heart and soul of that team. And we worked you hard. We ran you. We did crazy things that probably caused you to wonder, what happened to this man? The first year he seemed to be okay. Now he's lost his mind. Well, it was because I was driven to help you guys become the best you could be. And you did it.
One of the things I always think about is I can never remember, not one time, a raised voice, a cuss word. I never remember that from you at all. I'm not as good a coach as you. That does happen to flow from me periodically. But I never remember that. And again, people are going to think I paid you for some of that stuff, so thank you for that. That was awesome. But the thing that I recall and I think about every time when I'm out coaching or something was it was 100% encouragement from you. And I think what gets a little bit interesting here to kind of, again, paint this picture is this team was not supposed to do anything, and we did such incredible stuff that all the papers and everybody was writing up on this Ragtag 10. Like, it became, I'm surprised there didn't end up being a movie over that one, actually. Then as we moved to Hall and Riley, you did change a little bit, although there was still nothing about the words. But I remember driving to practice, and we were having these marathon practices, and you were like, okay, yeah, we're going to run a couple miles before we get started. And we're like, well, wait, Parris, wait. We're not track stars, too. We play baseball here. We just need to hit and throw the ball. And I remember that, and it was the first time I thought, well, now, wait a minute. I don't really want him to change. And you never did, but it was an interesting transition. And I think I can definitely see you taking us from that, young teenager kind of starting to mature us in through life. But you did it so subtly that we didn't, I don't know if we caught on. We just said, yes, sir, let's go do this.
Well, your observation is astute. However, there's a neat story behind this that I don't think you and I have ever even discussed. See, I never played a game of organized baseball in my life.
Right.
I never played on a little league team. I didn't think I was good enough at baseball to even go out and try out for a team. I became a distance runner in high school because that was something that I could dig down and find something so deep within me and grind it out and put in the mileage and the work and gut it out during the races. That's what I excelled in as a high school and college runner. But because I had never played baseball, even though I had studied the game and loved the game, I took my teaching skills, combined that with this commitment to excellence, combined it with this belief that you can mold people in positive reinforcement. And you're right. I always tried to model positive reinforcement because you guys ate it up. I mean, you just thrived on it. And that's why we were so good. You never gave up. Remember the game? They scored 10 runs in the first inning. We came back and won that game 11-10 at the state tournament when you guys were 13. You remember it well. You remember every probably detail of that. But the running part in the 2 miles and gutting it out was to build within you guys, not only stronger legs, but a lion-hearted commitment and a lion-hearted dedication and the pure guts to be able, when the going got tough out there in an inning, or it was a big at bat that could win the game, that as crazy as it might sound, I believe that discipline that came from the running and the other things that we did was there for you to draw upon, and that helped us come through. Now, I don't know if that makes any sense, but that was my logic behind it.
I think it's what makes you special, and it worked just like that. Now, there are some times here that I want listeners to understand this, because I know, again, I think we call you the professor for a reason, right? We didn't understand it then, but you had all of our respect. It was yes, sir, always, because you just had our respect for what we had done. But I remember you came up to us and you said, hey, guys, this team is really good, but here's what our signs are going to be. And you started using cartoon characters as our signs. And now, mind you, we're older now, and we're like, what the hell is he doing? What do you mean Scooby-Doo this? What is he doing? We're going to be the laughing stock, right? But we said, yes, sir, right? And I'll never forget that it threw the other teams so off. Like they were laughing at us. They were doing all this other stuff a whole time while we're kicking their butts. Was that something that you did to lighten us? Was that something you did to throw off the team? What was that all about? I've always wondered that.
There's a combination of things. Of course, we used our regular signs too, and it was just a different layer, a different element thrown into the mix to get them wondering what's going on here, and to, in a form, distract them a little bit. I don't think it was seeking an unfair advantage. It was just taking a fun way, and the people up in the crowds, the parents, I'd hear them up there talking about how fun this was, and how they were glad to be able to see this, even though their kids weren't even on this team, that they saw the way you guys reacted to that. They saw the way we used that, and it was crazy. It was unlike anything else that probably any other baseball coach has ever done. It's probably so unorthodox that the purists would say, oh, that's pretty stupid. But you guys enjoyed it. You bought into it. In fact, you bought into everything that I ever asked you to do. And that's why in those really tough games where we had to come back and win, or we had to hold off a great team that we had no business even being on the field with, let alone beating, it was because you guys believed in everything that we were doing, that you were not going to be denied. You were not going to allow that game to be lost because you were so invested in it and so sure that it didn't matter what happened, we were going to pull it out. And that's how we were so successful for so long.
You know, one of the things that I recall, and again, it's something that I think if coaches saw this, they would be like, "What in the hell?" But I remember you hanging in the dugout, and you said, "I'm not coming down until Ernie Carruthers gets a hit," and you hung there for a couple innings, and it was like I don't know why that impacted me so much, but I'm thinking, man, if he's willing to hang there, and I swear you would have hung there till the next game we played. I remember that. I remember that being impactful for me, and I still think of that today. Like when I'm making a big business decision or something that's really impactful, I have these Parris moments that come back to me, which is, again, why I wanted you on the show so bad. It wasn't so easy for us, though. After we started building a name, Parris Watts started taking a lot of heat in the press. We got kicked out of a league, and mainly for being too successful.
That did happen. And like you've alluded to, Mitch, the other teams that used to just take the Quad Cities team, which we were originally known as, for granted that there's going to be just, we're going to roll right over us. See, until we went there when you guys were 13 to Macon to play in that district tournament, forever, at least 10 years that the league had been formed, the Quad City teams would go to that district tournament. It was double elimination tournament. They would play 2 games and go home. In fact, we were 7th seeded in that district tournament. I never told you guys that, but we were 7th seeded. Now, we got really fortunate in that we drew a bye the first round because, as you recall, we only had 2 pitchers. We had Ernie Carruthers and Derek Watts, and they would throw the full 7 innings game after game because we had nobody else. Steve Johnson came along later and brought, great talent to our mix, but we in the 13-year-old group had the 2 pitchers. These teams, after we came up out of the losers bracket, remember we lost to Kirksville in the semifinal round, had to come back and win 3 games in a row to even play for the championship, and then won that. What happened in all that? The word started to get out, and they no longer took us for granted. They no longer saw us as a patsy. They really prepared, and that's why we had even greater games and greater competition later in our 4 years together, because it became keen and fierce at that point. But we rose to the occasion, and there's where I think those long marathon practices, people need to know that your parents would bring you to the baseball field, drop you off before 8 a.m. in the morning, and come back and get you at 5 o'clock. You'd each have a little lunch you would pack, but remember, I'd have those big coolers full of fruit and juice and stuff. And we would practice hard until about noon out on the field. We had the old shade trees that we would get under. And then from noon until about 2 or 2:30, we would do mental stuff. We would be under the trees, kind of resting a little, talking about strategy. We would get a base out. We would work on leadoffs, 2 ways, 1 way back, 2 way back, all that stuff that I didn't know about from playing the game like you guys did. I learned it. Another thing you need to know, when I was at the University of Missouri as a professor there, Gene McCarter, who was the head baseball coach, and a very successful head baseball coach at Mizzou for 20 years, I asked him if I could sit in one semester on his coaching of baseball class, and he let me sit in. And I became this obsessed student of taking these meticulous notes and studying this stuff just like I was in the class. I didn't take the test, but in that class, I actually learned about the game of baseball and took that with my love for the game, took that with my commitment to helping young people develop not just as players, but develop their character and develop their personalities and develop their ability to become successful. Like we talked recently, the guys on that Ragtag 10, you guys have achieved phenomenal things, highly successful in amazing ways. And is it because of the Ragtag 10? I'm not asking for credit for that, but if I, as a part of all this, help contribute just a little bit to what you became as men and as successful human beings and as what appears to be happy and fulfilled human beings, that's what it was all about. Back to your point about these teams getting ready for us, and you'll probably remember some specific ones you want to focus on, but we got to a point where we weren't taking people by surprise anymore. We got to the point where we had to earn every one of those victories, and we had to beat teams that were, even when we had that great group of you together when you were 16, we had talent like we'd never had before, but we were playing teams that were often far more talented and had been traveling teams that had played together the whole season. And we would just get together after our regular season was over for a week or two back then and get a team ready. But we got ready and we gave them all they wanted, and we won a lot more than we lost.
You know, one of the things I've been talking to Steve a lot about, over the years. But I'll bring this specific story up. The Train, which was one of these teams you were talking about, they pull in their big buses, and then you got the big Columbia teams, the all stars from all the major D1 potential kids. And I'll remember this. This is another one that I think of when I think of Parris all the time. It was myself, it was you and Steve Johnson. We were on the mound. We were actually pounding down the mound, doing some dirt work in there. And here they roll up with their 5 unis, their different sets of cleats. We're like, oh my God, are you kidding me? And I remember those guys, they come and did a walk around, which number one, I was pissed because we just drug the field. And I'm thinking, man, what are you doing a walk around when we just dragged the field? But they come over there and they're like, oh my God, this park is small. We're going to be taking them out of here left and right. And Steve and I were kind of looking. And I don't know if you recall this exact sentence, because in Truth Talks, we always talk, there's 8 seconds that has a potential change in your life in every conversation. You looked at us and you said, well, listen, we can either go home or we can win this thing. Which one do you want to do? And I was like, yeah, well, why don't we just go ahead and go win this thing? And we were outmatched. These were all D1 prospects. And somehow, again, you convinced us that not only could we win this thing, we were going to win that thing. And it was, I can't even express it or even sometimes put it into words how many times with other coaches I've had where you're like, man, I wonder if we can do this. But then we knew we could. It was like there was no way we weren't going to do it.
Again, Mitch, that's a wonderful compliment. To help your listeners and viewers know kind of the full story here, our backs were to the wall in that game. We had lost earlier that day to Columbia team, which had also beaten the Train in the opening round of that tournament. So Columbia was a powerhouse, knocked us both off. So that's how we were in the losers bracket together. But the Train didn't care. They were so confident. They had like 8 pitchers and unbelievable talent. They thought they'd come back and beat Columbia twice on Sunday. And they very well could have. We did it, and they certainly could have. But we could not afford to lose that game. I mean, we lose that game, that's our second loss. We go home, and they're playing Columbia the next day in that doubleheader. Well, the rest of that story. We had a young man who pitched the game of his life, not one of our top line pitchers, but we had to go to him. When you're in the losers bracket, you got to figure out, of course, you got to do everything you can to win those games, but you also got to figure out, what if I win this game? How are we going to be set up for pitching with 2 games against this incredible powerhouse team the next day? So we went with this young man. And I think a lot of it, Mitch, of course, we had Charlie Brown, who was our pitching coach, and he was phenomenal. He had pitched in college. He was great. He was funny. He was knowledgeable. And the pitchers, you didn't get this experience because you didn't pitch, but he kind of got them wrapped around his fingers, and he got his brain and theirs intermingled together. and they were ready to throw that ball through a brick wall. He talked to Dwayne Durham, the guy who pitched this game, and I talked to him, and we just pumped this guy up. Charlie got him ready. He pitched the game of his life, as you know, beat the Train 5-2, and they were shocked. And I heard the people up in the stand saying things like, "This is the best good old country hardball we've seen in a long time." Well, you know, the rest of that story, we came back the next day and in both ends of that doubleheader beat Columbia and went on to the state tournament as a result of that. But you are so right about that experience on the mound, that little conversation we had, the one that Charlie and I had with Dwayne that you never were privy to. All of those little, almost insignificant moments were the difference.
Yeah, they culminate into greatness, and that is what I wanted people to see from this podcast. Is just sometimes it's that 8 seconds, that one sentence, but it's all set up by who you were. And I want to now tell this story. This story is one that me and my dad talk about all the time, and I could say a billion incredible things about how you coached and how you led us in and how you've changed my life and how I use a lot of Parrisisms throughout my career. But it was high school. It was New Franklin against Salisbury. This was the game to go on to the show. And your son, Derek Watts, was pitching. We had a guy on second, I believe. And the guy that was hitting behind me was having a hard year. Base open. And you went out to the mound to visit with Derek. And when you walked away, it was like kind of watching your other dad kind of walk away. But at that point in time, we're rivals, you know. And you pitched to me. And we'll talk about the outcome or whatever, but I want to go and how that also still plays a role in my dad, who's 86, in his life, because we talk about this frequently, and I don't know why it was so powerful for him, but you went over to my dad due to a lot of people who did not like the call that you made when you were on the mound, and you told my dad, you said, "Sam, I had to pitch to him. It was the right thing to do." I think about that more than ever. Can you explain that story?
Be glad to, Mitch. And I'm so glad you remember that and your dad remembers that. Sam, a special, special guy. And I have high regard and great respect for him and your mother, your whole family. That's the other neat part of all this that we won't have time to go into enough, but it's so important. Yes, I pitched or asked Derek to pitch. First of all, he was a fierce competitor just like you. And he was a very good pitcher. And he wanted to always have the opportunity to see if he could win the battle. And I knew that was important to him. I knew you were going to be an incredible hitter to get out in that situation. But we talked about it there on the mound, and there was no question. We were going to pitch to you because, and I didn't explain this to him at the time. I didn't explain to your dad other than saying I had to pitch to him, is because I was looking at something bigger and far more important. I was looking at a situation where you and Derek at some time later in your lives would face a tough situation. And I wanted to just put another little event, experience, whatever you want to call it, into your quiver of arrows that would be something you could call upon. And you won that battle. You got the big hit and won that game. Derek gave it all he had, and he lost to a very fine competitor. But you both did what was the right thing to do, and that is face each other. He was the best pitcher we had on that team. You were the best hitter on the other team. It was the best against the best to see who wins, but also to take with each of you a life experience. And that's what that was all about. And you have both been so highly successful. I would like to believe that that was maybe just a little smidgen of part of what made you become who you both become.
I don't think you understand how much of a smidgen that is. It's a big smidgen in my world, and I often wonder, does Dwayne Durham think about that day? And I'm sure he does. I often wonder about all these things. I want to go through one more thing here. I got to bring this story in. I'm coaching my kids' football team, and there was this kid. He was new to the team, and when I first got him, he was kind of lanky, all legs. Pretty big, thick glasses on. He didn't look like your typical great athlete. And as I'm working this kid out, I'm like, oh my goodness, this kid is a gamer. He reminded me of us then. He was like, yes, sir, I'll do whatever you want, sir. Everything, he was just there to compete. He wanted to compete. We get down to the championship game. We throw him the ball on an extra point. We were running out of time, and he dropped it. It would have put us up. And immediately his head goes down. And there's some other issues that were going on personally as well. And I remember, this is the craziest thing, and I hope other people have the same experience, but I remember your name pops in my head. I make a beeline right for that kid, and I look at him, because some of the other kids, they're competitors too. When the ball gets dropped, they can only think of losing. But I went straight to that kid, and I said, let me tell you something. This is going to define you right now. I go, if we get a chance and we get the ball back, I'm going to throw it to you every time, and I need you to tell me you want that ball. You don't want someone else to score it. You want that ball. And the kid looked up at me, and he says, I want that ball. And he went from dejected to determined in 2 seconds. Make a long story short, we get the ball back with a short amount of time. He ends up making the winning catch. And that was Parris Watts, man. I channeled you into that game because I needed him to believe in himself, and I wanted to believe in him so bad. And I can't tell you how unbelievable of a role model you have been in my life, without you probably even knowing it that much. I did chase you all over the country. I would have to sometimes find your number and find out where you were at. We even had a reunion for you where everybody showed up. I think Carl was the only one that couldn't, and he was on business. But everyone showed up, and it was mind-blowing to me how we're all old men now, and we still recall you as our coach and the motivation that you brought to us. And I don't know what else to say about that, but I wanted to run a segment on this particularly because it was such a special time in my life, and I think a special time in all these other guys' life, and I think it was a rarity, Dr. Watts. I think you're a rarity, and I would hope that people listening to this, if they get the opportunity to coach, if they get the opportunity to influence kids, man, the Parris Watts, I think you need a book on how to do this, the top 10 ways of getting greatness out of average people, because I think that's exactly what you did.
Oh, Mitch, what a wonderful compliment. And I feel honored to hear those words. But my greatest honor was being able to work with you and the others and to have the experiences and the fun and the craziness and the hard work and the accomplishments and the feeling of satisfaction, even in the times that we would lose, of we gave it all we had. We left it everything right there in that last at bat or that last effort to win that game. And that is carried over into people's lives, and that's what matters in this world.
Man, does it ever, and everybody needs that. We were from all different walks of life, from everything. You gelled us into one team. It was amazing. I want to end it right here, though. I want to end it with this question, and I think I know the answer, but I want to end it here. Obviously, I've described how your influence on me was, but as you also transitioned into obviously the great big academic world, when I hear you talk about the outs, to know the innings, to know the games, obviously that's a person who cared more than anybody, right? That's what I love about you. That's why I've always stayed in contact with you. How did coaching us affect you the rest of your life?
It caused me to realize there was a part of me that I would have never experienced without having done that. A part of living my own childhood in a way again through young men who are having experiences that I never had at those ages, but seeing how that so positively affected them, and the laughter and the joy, and mixed in with all the sweat and hard work of just a camaraderie, a brotherhood of young men to be that I could be a part of. Often I've thought back on that and counted my blessings over and over about even having been given that opportunity. And maybe my greatest reward, Mitch, and that's why I know the innings and the counts and all the circumstances involved in these monumental turning points in each of these games, is because I still remember, think about, relive some of this, not trying to live in the past and not living in something that was, fantasy world, but just because, first of all, it was so wonderful. I don't ever want to leave that totally behind as long as I have a functioning mind. And secondly, because it teaches me and reminds me over and over again of how these seemingly insignificant moments can be monumental and can make a difference in the lives of others. It certainly has made a difference in my life as it transferred over into the tough things I've had to deal with in my career. I've lost count of the number of times that I would remember experiences we had as a part of the Ragtag 10 and other teams that followed that got me through some difficult situations. Just maybe it was a bit of a distraction so I could get back better focused. Maybe it was, hey, I kind of still owe it to these guys who I don't know where they are now to come through on this. So I'm going to do it because I expect they are counting on me to do it or would think about me counting on me doing it. And then stick my head in there and get it done and say, hey, Ragtag 10 guys, I think you helped me a lot. Thanks.
It's awesome. I know we've had multiple discussions before. As long as you're alive and as long as you'll answer the phone, I'm going to call you when big things are happening or arise. That's how important and monumental you were in my life. You and I talked about it, and I'll kind of leave it here because this is just so sentimental to me. It's heartwarming that I'm even talking to you on here today. But at the end of the season, we had a really successful season this year. And at the end of the season, I wrote each one of those kids a personal letter, and most of it had nothing to do with football. It was to do with what I think that they're capable of accomplishing later on based on what skill sets they showed me, and that's a Parrisism. I never got that in any other coaching, and I had a lot of coaches, and but I never got that anywhere other than you. And so I want to tell you that I do thank you for answering those phone calls when I call, because sometimes if I ever need to pick me up or I've got a lot of stress on me, I call Parris Watts. And as crazy as that seems, man, I call my coach, right? So you're going to probably be my coach until you're gone or I'm gone or however it ends up happening. But I thank you from the bottom of my heart for being who you were. I thank you for the family for allowing it all to happen, because you spent so much time with us and developing us, and it's funny how everything comes full circle. Derek and I have talked about doing business together now here just recently, and how does that all come full circle? I think it's building that brotherhood and that love you had for us as kids, and wanting us to see us and grow up and be successful and good men. And I don't know what else to say, my friend, but I love you for it.
Mitch, keep up your great work. You're doing wonderful work with your family, with your coaching, with your career, with the Truth Talks. It's amazing to me. I'm proud of you, man. Really, truly proud of you.
I appreciate it. I didn't know if I'd get through this without crying, because I was always a softie anyway, man. I wanted to win the game so damn bad I'd cry if we didn't. So, I thank you so much again for coming on the show, and keep your phone open for me if you would.
You can count on it, Mitch.
All right, brother. I love you so much.
Love you too, man.
All right. Bye-bye.